Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parent Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen gets jealous of my dress and dumps a milkshake on me. After that, if you give me your keys, I'm going to toss them in the gutter. And after that, client tried to do me over by locking me out of my own system. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen gets a milkshake dropped on her. Ooh, as long as it's strawberry, count me in. So please smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen gets jealous of my dress and dumps a milkshake on me. Me, my husband, and our 15-year-old daughter, Georgia, went to my sister's place for lunch this weekend. Georgia is very bright. She completed her exams early and is now studying more advanced material. She's a big fashionista, a lot more than I was at that age. She loves pretty clothes and outfits, and we're happy to get her as much as we can, provided she behaves well and keeps up the good grades. The lunch with my sister was fairly casual, but Georgia wore her new pink dress. My sister isn't as well off as we are, unfortunately. She's raising her 3 kids on her own, and her job isn't a high-paying one. In the past, she asked me if Georgia could tone down her outfits when we come to visit because she doesn't want her kids being upset because they can't afford things like that. I do get my sister's point, but it's not down to me to police what Georgia wears. I have spoken to Georgia about it, but I left the final decision to her. Anyway, so we went for lunch, and Georgia ended up getting into an argument when my sister's 13-year-old, Lucy, asked about the dress and where it was from. Georgia answered that it didn't matter because Lucy couldn't afford it anyway. We told Georgia to shut up as soon as the comment left her lips, but it soon ended with Georgia and Lucy screaming at each other. My sister made the kids vanilla milkshakes, and Lucy decided to throw hers all over Georgia, ruining the dress. Georgia burst into tears, and to be fair, my sister did bring her a change of clothes. I said that if the dress was permanently ruined, I wanted my sister to reimburse us. My sister has refused and said that it was our responsibility because my daughter wore an expensive dress, despite being warned not to. That dress cost a couple of $100, and washing it has failed to completely remove the stains. Frankly, I don't care about my sister's warnings. We can't make Georgia wear what she doesn't want to, and it's not our problem that she can't control her kid and stop her from ruining a beautiful dress. Am I the jerk? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her sister? Please let us know. It doesn't matter because your family can't afford it, and you people call me entitled. If you give me your keys, I'm going to toss them in the gutter. This happened about 16 to 17 years ago, when I was in my late 20s. Now, one thing I know about myself is that I'm a babyface. Even now at 44, I'm tall and I have an athletic build, so I get mistaken for a young 20-something all the time. So you can imagine what I looked like at the age of 27 or 28. Now, couple that with the fact that I'm a black man, relevant later, and you can just imagine what my life has been like. So my team was having a retirement celebration for our manager, and we had a dinner party at a restaurant near our workplace after hours. The shindig ended up being about 25 to 30 people, mostly older. I think I was one of 2 or 3 people under the age of 40, and it was nice. Our manager shed a tear or two, gave a nice speech, blah blah blah, etc. The restaurant was open for business, and there were other small parties, couples, etc. there, and they ignored us and we ignored them. But we weren't segregated. We were seated towards the center of the seating area around a large table and a second smaller one. So fast forward to the end of the dinner, and we're all outside now, saying our final goodbyes, and on the verge of dispersing, and I was among the group. So a few people start to make their way home, and our group is now whittled down to about 10 to 12 people. Other patrons and pedestrians are coming and going like normal, and there we are just chatting amongst ourselves. Notably, our manager was still there with his plaque, a relatively large picture frame, and a couple of gift bags. So again, it should have been evident to anybody who was in the restaurant for the last hour who we were. You would think. And then it happens. I'll call her Pre-Karen, since this was before people like her were a meme. Karen. Excuse me? Me. Yes, ma'am? Karen. Here are my keys. For? For you to get my car. Me. I'm sorry, I don't work here, ma'am. I don't have time for games. Here are my keys. As she's saying this, she tries to stuff her keys in my hand. Now I'm upset. Me. If you put your keys in my hand, I'm going to throw them across the street and into the gutter. Then why do you have a badge on? As she's saying this, she reaches out to grab my badge. What the heck? Which was on a lanyard hanging around my neck, around my midsection. But before she could, I snatched it away. Me. If you touch me again, I will consider it assault and call the police. I don't work here. She withdraws her hand and I release my badge, which she proceeds to study for the 2 or so seconds it would take to figure out it's not a restaurant or valet badge. I believe the restaurant contracts out their valet service, and having done valet work during college, I'm fairly certain my business attire does not in any way resemble the uniforms. Think tacky vest with logo and matching pants, or the 2 or 3 companies that are in my area. And furthermore, none of them do badges on lanyards. Then she looks me up and down, comes back to lock eyes with me, and while starting to turn away, utters that word. You know which one, under her breath. Not gonna lie, it caught me off guard, and in the 15 years since, I've thought of the perfect comeback more times than I cared to admit, the other story of my life. But on the bright side, I'm prepared now. But in that moment, I simply couldn't force words to come out of my mouth. So I just turned around and tried to shake off my shock and anger and proceed as if everything was fine. Most of the remaining coworker group, a mix of black and white, was aware of what had just transpired. But there was nothing to be said or done really. So we just kind of started small talking again. Client tried to do me over by locking me out of my own system. I've worked as an independent contractor in the IT field for over 20 years, doing all manner of things from creating simple HTML sites to managing a big hotel's complete IT infrastructure. One of the many clients I had back in the day I was coding big custom websites was a rental company. Now, I had heard a lot of warnings about not working with this guy that owned it. He had a reputation that he was sharp as a tack, backstabbing and conniving. He was a lawyer after all. So I went into the partnership with that in mind. He wanted a new website for his renting gig, where people would list their home for rent, renters would sign up and pay a subscription to the site, and he would get the whole lot. Nothing out of the ordinary there. So we make a pretty good deal on paper, we sign it, and I get started on the project. Coding everything in PHP goes well, but he demands suddenly that I show him progress only a week into the progress. He wants to see the website front now. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I tried explaining to him that the front-end work isn't scheduled to start until after 6 weeks of back-end programming, and that I only had pure code to show right now. The contract we signed clearly states this. He then gets on his high horse and demands that I put everything on hold to do the front-end first, design and then program. I, being really young at the time and fairly naive, agreed to this without asking for it to be added to the contract as an addendum and started working on the design now. Now, the contract stated I was given free reign of the design decisions as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the same logo on the site. So I made a fast draft in Fireworks. This was back when it was a Macromedia product, before the Adobe acquisition, and within 2 days I show him. He's not impressed and demands a different direction and sets up a list of demands. I, as always, aim to please the customer and do just what he wants. I design a new layout with his list of demands, but he doesn't like that either. That's how the next 3 months go, a never-ending circle where he is never happy with anything. Now, close to 4 months into the project, he demands to see a working showcase of the back end. I point out that he himself changed the order and how the project was being done and had demanded that I do the front-end design first instead of the back end as stated in the contract, which he now turns on me and says, "Yes, the contract we both signs says you will have a working back end to show me at the end of the month. If you don't honor that, I will have to take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your lack of professionalism." Okay, I now have 12 days to do a back end for this site. So I get a friend to help me, and we work tirelessly through a weekend, and I have a good base to work from in 9 days. Mind you, at this point, he has only paid the security on the contract, about 5% of the total price, and has shielded himself from paying by hiding behind, "Well, if you can't honor the contract, why should I? Finish this work, and then I'll pay as per the contract." Remembering now all the warnings I had heard about this guy, I decided to add a special function to the code just to be safe. More on that later. So now it's the end of the month. We have a front-end design he's okay with, a back-end that has been finished to about 85% of what is required according to the contract, and I still have 1 month left to finish everything else. Time for show and tell. Since I was working on this development, I was running it on my own dev server and showed him this in a browser on his computer. I mentioned to him that since I only had 512 kilobytes upstream from the server, it might lag a little, but it wouldn't when it would be put on the professional server he has his website on at his hosting company. He says that's okay, and the demonstration goes on. As I'm showing him the site, both front-end and back-end, I can see he's immensely unhappy with it, although he would never say so aloud. He's trying to hide his smile that pops up regularly, and his eyes gleam with all of the added ways he can now start making money from. Anyway, he now says that it's way too slow, this is wrong, that is wrong, blah blah blah. Client: I want you to put it up on my production server and see how the speed is. Me: okay, no problem, I can make that happen. Please pay 50% of the contract and I'll get right on it. Okay, I wait a few days and then I get an email from him where he includes a forwarded message from the bank detailing a transaction from him to me to the amount of the 50% I asked for. So I push the system to his production server so he can take a look at it under beta.hisdomain.tld. I then send him an email stating he can try the system with the supplied credentials. What he doesn't know is that I know he had been fishing around for another programmer to do this project, to pick up from a lazy deadbeat who couldn't do anything right. So I knew he would most likely try to do me over. What I also suspected was that the email he sent me with a transaction proof was a fake, which it ended up being. ProRevenge 1. Remember that small function I mentioned? Well, what it did was if user X, his user, tries to remove user Y, my admin, from the system without one setting being changed in the config first, the system will first delete and purge the database, and then remove all the documents in the web root. Well, not 5 minutes after he reads the email from me, he does just that. He tries to delete my admin user from the system to lock me out. Guess who has nothing of the project left? He does. ProRevenge 2. Since it is considered forgery to spoof an email, especially from a bank, I sent the information to the authorities and he goes under investigation by both the police and the bank lawyers. ProRevenge 3. I sold the system to a competitor of his for a better price than originally contracted to him, and last I knew, he was now blacklisted from owning a company as well as he lost his right to work as a lawyer. I only got that 5% he paid at the beginning, and for working for just over 5 months on this project, that's hardly anything. But the knowledge of his demise will keep my heart warm for the rest of my life. Karen demands I babysit the entire neighborhood for free. Back when I was a kid, my uncle married a woman I despised. She was a manipulator, social climber, and an all-around gross person. She had 2 sons from a previous marriage. At the time of this story, I was 14, and the boys, who were horrendously behaved, were 6 and 8. I had sworn off babysitting them because they would try to hurt me, and she refused to pay me. But I made an exception this one time because due to some issues they had going on, I felt sad for their family. So I said I would do it for free just this once. They lived in one of those neighborhoods where your neighbors just walk in your house and say hi and kids roam freely. Basically one of my versions of heck, but I digress. There was a crazy neighbor that lived across the street that kind of scared me. She is what we now know as a Karen. Well, Karen's 2 kids, ages roughly 4 and 8, show up in the yard while I'm watching my cousins. The boy starts climbing the tree and dangling from tall branches while I begged him to get down and told him that it wasn't safe. I knew Karen enough to know that if he fell out of the tree, I was going to get it. The boy refused and climbed higher and higher, so I said he needed to go home, but he wouldn't. I said fine, but my cousins and I were going in because I would not be responsible. He tried to follow us in and I had to lock the doors. About 15 minutes later, Karen comes pounding on the door, screaming at me to get out there. So I go out, afraid the boy had gone back in the tree and had gotten hurt. But no, she was livid I wouldn't babysit her kids. She got right in my face, to the point I could smell the box wine on her breath, and screamed how if one neighbor has a babysitter, the whole neighborhood has one, and that's how things are done there. I calmly said I wasn't even getting paid, but if they want to organize group babysitting, call someone else, because I was 14 and too young to do it. I told my uncle's wife what happened when they got home, and she took her turn yelling at me and accused me of trying to ruin her friendship with Karen. My uncle just stood there. When my dad picked me up, I waited until we got home to tell him what happened, and he called my uncle in a rage. But my uncle agreed I should have babysit his stepkids, Karen's kids, plus the other 3 kids that were there. but not causing trouble. I never babysat for them again, and several years later, the marriage ended in divorce when my uncle took one of the kids to the park and found her on a date with one of her boyfriends. Would you ever babysit your cousins for free, or not in a million years? Please let us know.
Time is money, friend.
Am I the jerk for asking my neighbors to stop putting signs in my yard? Some backstory. I live in a corner lot. On one side, it's a neighborhood road, and the other side is a big old public road. Part of my property has several easements, and it's easy to mistake these areas as common areas, but it's all actually private property. The amount of people who assume they can use these areas of my land is mind-boggling. Every weekend, there are at least 2 to 3 signs in my yard. Spa sale, show, real estate XYZ, moving sale, you name it. Not only do I find them trashy personally, but they're illegal per city regulation. Illegal in public right-of-way, permit required, or landowner permission required. People also sometimes think they're my signs, where I have to stop and explain yet again to a random garage sale chaser that it's not my sale, or to city police code enforcement. The story. I removed yet another moving sale sign and thought nothing of it until I came out the next morning to another one, this time placed further into my yard, and a suspicious, angry-looking dude sitting in his car across the street. Closer inspection revealed a small note at the bottom that the HOA approved the sign and not to remove it. Signed, a board member. Just like that. No name, phone number, just a board member. As I removed the sign, suspicious guy turned on his car and sped off into our neighborhood. Then, for the next couple of hours or so, the same guy/car would repeatedly do slow drives by the front side of the house where I was working, glaring at me. So obviously, it was his sign. Now, I've been confronted, but I've never had anyone do anything like this before. So I decided to end it by returning the last sign and explaining why I was removing them, and proceeding to do exactly that. I walked until I saw the yard sale, asked if this was their sign, then calmly explained that it was a frequent error for people to assume it was open space, but it was actually my property and the city will fine me for having temporary signs in my yard. Please stop putting them there, yada yada yada. As I'm turning to walk away, the guy from the car goes, "It's actually HOA property." Like he didn't listen to a thing I just said. So I assured him it was most certainly not HOA property. It was mine, and he can verify that with the county assessor's office if he were so inclined. I go to walk away again, and now the lady, the board member, is chastising me too for removing her sign, for not coming to talk to her, both of which I was technically doing. My actions are completely unacceptable. This isn't how you behave. Absolutely no recognition for either her or her husband's behavior. Anyways, the HOA is involved now, and they're all acting like I'm a huge jerk. I just don't get it. This is my property. Just stay off of it, right? Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you let them put the signs in your yard or not? Please let us know.
I'd spray paint them and turn them into bright, beautiful rainbows. My property, my rules.
Yes, I do work here, and I'm your new manager. In 2016, I was the new girl once again. We moved every few years of my childhood. I was in a new marriage, in a new state, and had just landed a new job as a pool manager for the local YMCA. I knew nobody. I had just renewed my certifications and was to sit in on the lifeguard training classes leading up to summer hiring. In order to get the Con Ed hours I needed for my lifeguard instructor certification renewal. Day 1 of class rolled around, and the room quickly filled with 16, 17, and 18-year-old high schoolers. They were all chatting away happily, comparing notes about prom dresses and upcoming graduation parties, who just gotten their driver's licenses, and more. I sat at the end of a U-shaped table, waiting for the lead instructor to arrive. A cute, bubbly girl sat down right next to me and asked me questions about myself. She figured out I'd just moved to town and was elated. She'd met a new friend that she could show around, as far as she was concerned. I listened intently as she told me which mall was trash and which movie theater had the best prices, and then she asked me which school I went to. It was in that moment that I finally realized she thought I was her age. I was 26 at the time. I'm a redhead with pale skin and freckles and only look almost my age if I'm wearing makeup, which I never did to the pool. I answered her, "Oh, I actually just enrolled at name of college, and I'm taking a full course load on top of this job." She excitedly told me she was also taking college courses on top of her high school classes and was set to graduate high school early. She was a junior and 17. I thought about telling her the truth, but the lead instructor walked in right at that moment. I let him quiet the class and introduce himself, and right on cue, he asked me to come to the front of the room to introduce myself as well. Hi y'all, my name is Foxy Freckles, and I'll be managing the pool this summer. I'll also be helping to certify you as lifeguards. Then we had each teen introduce themselves and played an icebreaker game. I looked at my employee roster and realized the bubbly girl would be working at my pool. The sweet girl recovered so quickly. I sat back down next to her and she leaned over and whispered, "OMG, I hope I look half as good as you do when I'm old." I laughed and thanked her and then informed her that she'd be working for me that season. She looked momentarily embarrassed but told me she couldn't wait. She ended up being one of my best guards that season, and I still keep up with her and give her references for new jobs almost 7 years later. She just graduated nursing school and is about to have a baby. I'm so proud of her, and it's a fond memory for sure. Apparently, I'm selfish because I won't refer my immature adult cousin who can't keep a job to the place I work at. My cousin is 22. I'm 25. My cousin hasn't worked since September of 2019 when she got fired from her last job, which is the one I was working at and referred her to. She got fired for dumping bottles of fart spray in the elevator, mouthing off to everyone, loudly complaining how she hates the job and her boss, taking long breaks, and not doing her work properly. I quit my job shortly after she got fired because it looked bad on me and I was embarrassed. Everyone knew she was my cousin because she went around showing pictures of us together and telling embarrassing made-up things about me. She also told everyone off on her way out of that job and told me off for recommending this place in front of everyone. Anyways, I think she started working in 2017 and she hasn't been able to keep any job she's had for longer than 2 months, sometimes less than that. She got fired from all of them. I know she got fired from one of the jobs because she was drinking in the break room. She posted all about it online. And another one, she got caught hooking up with her coworker who was dating another coworker at the time and they got into a fight. Another one, she hated this girl she worked with, so she was spreading rumors about her and trying to get her in trouble. Just a bunch of immature crap. I want to say she has probably gone through around 14 or 15 different jobs, and she wonders why people won't hire her. Let's see. No references or prior places you worked at because you won't list them. You're 22 years old with no resume or anything. I currently work as a CNA at a retirement center. I've been working here for about a year now. My job has radio ads out there claiming they're hiring for servers or hospitality aides, which require no experience, and I guess my aunt wants my cousin to get a job because she's sick of paying for her. My cousin has been applying for a few months, but hasn't had many callbacks. Gee, I wonder why. Anyways, my aunt suggested to my mom that I refer her to my workplace because I got her a job before. My mom brought this up to me, and I refuse. Knowing how she's previously acted, no way. It will look bad on me if she does something, and I will have to find another job. My mom got mad and told me to call my aunt and explain why I won't help family members out. I called my aunt and told her I'm sorry she can't find a job, but I'm not referring her. Not after what she did last time. It will look bad on me. She can apply if she wants, but I'm not referring her. My aunt called me selfish because she's family. And yeah, she messed up, but she's matured and she deserves another chance to work like everybody else. I said, okay, then she can go to their website and apply. And my aunt said she's more likely to get the job if a family member refers her. It's not all about you. Your cousin needs a job too. I said, I never said it was all about me, but I have a job to maintain too. My aunt told me to get over myself, let go of the grudge, and that was 8 years ago. Since when is 2019 years ago? And she said my cousin can't find a job and she's applied to so many. And I said that's not my problem and hung up. She left me a nasty voicemail saying she can't believe she's related to me and that I'm treating her so poorly. She's been nothing but nice to me, yada yada. Then she called my mom and started yelling at her about how rude and inconsiderate I was being, and my mom yelled at me. I just left for work and I'm getting angry texts from my mom. I'm at a Starbucks typing this. It's not my fault she ruined every single job she's had by doing something immature and stupid at it. I don't know why she won't grow up or take accountability for anything, and I'm not buying the, oh, she's matured thing my aunt said because she causes drama all the time on Instagram and makes everything about her. She hasn't matured. That's a lie. Why is it my responsibility to get her hired somewhere? Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you go ahead and refer your cousin or not? Please let us know.
I'd cut her out of my life is what I'd do. Whether or not you're related to them is completely irrelevant.
Am I the jerk for telling my wife that what my son earns is none of her concern? I'm the father of two, Tom, who's 26, and stepdaughter, Judy, who's 22. Tom has a good paying job, while Judy is still studying. They're both engaged to their partners, and the family are expecting 2 weddings this summer. Tom started his wedding planning, and he spent quite a lot of money on it. He and fiancé chose a nice venue, afford to invite many guests, and add more food options. My wife told me Judy said her stepbrother showed her the expensive venue he and his fiancé picked, and Judy thought it wasn't fair that Tom spent that much on just the venue while she and her fiancé are struggling to save up for their entire wedding. I asked my wife what that means, and she told me to think about it this way. Both Tom and Judy are getting married this summer. People, our families, will attend Tom's wedding and say it was great, but then attend Judy's wedding 3 months later and will say, unlike her stepbrothers, her wedding is cheap, with no great venue or quality food, and not a lot of guests to afford. Basically, comparing the two and gossiping about Judy's wedding. I said all weddings are different. Who is going to compare 2 weddings? Who does that? She told me family and friends. She said that perhaps Tom could help his sister with money to afford a decent wedding, if not equal. I laughed it off and said this is not a competition, and weddings are supposed to be about the couples only, not what people think. But she said Judy feels like her wedding will be less than compared to Tom's. She said we've raised both kids equal and gave them everything equal. We can't just ruin it now and cause drama. Then brought up that Tom earns a lot of money, so no harm in helping his sister by funding some of her wedding. I told her what my son earns is none of her concern, that's it. And even if he earns a lot, doesn't mean he's obligated to fund other people's weddings. It's absurd. She took this as in I was being passive-aggressive and should always be encouraging Tom and Judy to help one another. Fine, but there's a difference between encouraging and pressuring one into helping the other. If this was an emergency, then yes, I'd bring it up to him, still expecting a no. But to ask him to pitch in his sister's wedding? That's overstepping the line. I frankly said I won't even bother my busy son with this non-issue, but she got mad that I'm not even considering talking to him and making a bit of effort to make Judy feel less strained and more supported in her wedding. I said no, and she got extremely upset and agitated, saying I'm the one refusing to help, not Tom, and that he's an adult and can decide if he wants to help. But she's asking me to talk to him, which I'm not going to do. We're still arguing about it. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know.
This is why you never marry a Karen, nor do you raise one. Double toil and trouble right here.
Am I the jerk for kicking my roommate out because her boyfriend is over all the time? I'm extremely unsure whether I am the jerk here or not. Usually I'm rather secure in my actions, but given the current situation around the world and the reason, or lack thereof, I wanted to see if I am the jerk here. I managed to buy my own apartment 4 years ago. After living there for about a year, I figured it would be a good idea to rake in some extra cash by renting out one of the 2 guest rooms. Since then, I have had 2 roommates, but the first guy was an amazing dude and we're still friends now. A year ago, my now roommate moved in, and it has been a very different experience. She is a very quiet person when she doesn't have friends over, so it has proven impossible to become friends due to this, and it is a bit awkward for that reason. I mean, it took several months for her to respond normally to me saying good morning instead of with an incoherent whisper. Regardless, I have not had many issues with her apart from that until about 3 months ago. Roommate got a boyfriend and he was around all the time. At first, I just figured he was sleeping over here and that's reasonable for any couple. My girlfriend sleeps over now and again too, but it quickly went to the level of where I would wake up to get my coffee and this dude was there every morning, midday and evening. It doesn't help that this dude is even more awkward to be around, and if you can remember the creepy silent kid in the corner of the class that follows you with his or her eyes all the time but says nothing back in high school, that's pretty much him. I spoke to her about this and she said she was sorry and would handle it, so I figured that would solve it. Well, I went to visit my parents for 2 weeks a little over 2 months ago. I couldn't get the holiday off, so I figured this was better than nothing. No worries, it was allowed here. And when I got home, I come back to 3 people. Turns out that my roommate had been allowing her boyfriend's parents to sleep in the guest room. Now the guest room is not part of the agreement. It's entirely mine and not a shared space. You can imagine I was upset. Unfortunately, instead of apologizing, her boyfriend got angry and started yelling at me, After which I kicked him and his parents out, told him he was no longer welcome. The next day I served my roommate with a 30-day eviction notice, which was the first time she showed emotion, as she immediately started crying about how she wouldn't be able to find anything else in time, how the reason her boyfriend was over here a lot was because he's homeless, etc. Crap went through and she moved out 3 weeks ago. I'm wondering whether I'm the jerk or not. It does feel similar to throwing out a shirt with a stain instead of washing it. In other words, I can't help but feel I didn't give her enough of a chance, given she barely caused any issues apart from very recently, and the reason for kicking her out was largely because of her boyfriend, not her. Well, what do you think? Should OP have kicked out his roommate or not? Please let us know.
I don't blame him one bit. Nothing irks me more than quiet people who just stare at me.
Come watch this video next, you won't believe what happens.